We're recording.
All right, Amy, thanks for having me. My name is Charley Thrash. I'm the Deputy Athletic Director for Revenue Generation at the University of North Texas.
Awesome.
Um, I just started in my role at North Texas here about 6 weeks ago, so I still have my training wheels on, still learning uh, where everybody's offices are and all that good stuff. But my role on the revenue generation side is overseeing all arms from that aspect. So ticketing, fundraising. I'm the liaison with our third party sponsorship arm, Learfield, um, apparel, as well as licensing. Um, I recently came from the University of Texas at El Paso, where I worked there for 4 years. The first two as associate athletic director, overseeing the minor athletic club, and then the last two as a senior associate AD, revenue generation, overseeing ticketing and then fundraising. Um, my path in college athletics started when I was a sophomore in college. I actually, as a freshman, thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. Realized that putting animals down and memorizing medicines probably wasn't the path for me, and kind of had a light bulb moment and realized that athletics was the route that I wanted to go. Was in the business school at the University of Missouri, and was able to secure some internships in the athletic department at the University of Missouri on the compliance side. Um, did that for 2 years while I was in undergraduate school, and realized that I probably needed to be more on the sales external side to fit my personality and kind of skill sets a little bit more. And graduated from the University of Missouri in 2012. Worked for minor league baseball team. That was just the first offer that I had. Probably applied to over 150 different institutions trying to get my foot in the door for a GA position or whatnot. And um, the minor league baseball team, it was an unpaid internship. That was the route that to buy some time I took, and it was great because they put me on the phones and cold calling and bringing groups out to minor league baseball games, and really getting after it right away and just kind of thrown into the fire there. Um, but still knew that college athletics was the route that I wanted to go. Um, was fortunate enough to have an offer from the University of Delaware to do kind of a post grad internship position in the ticket office. Did that for a year and a half, more on the operations side. Um, and then my first full benefited job was at the University of Wyoming in 2014 as their assistant ticket manager on the operations side. Was promoted to our assistant AD for ticketing and operations and sales. Did a little bit more on the sales side, um, and did that for 2 years. So was at Wyoming for 3.5 years. Uh, Knew that if I wanted to keep progressing and hone in on my skill set, I needed fundraising experience. A gentleman that I worked with at the University of Wyoming took a role at the University of South Florida. Connected with him, and he hired me actually to go to be the assistant athletic director for the annual fund at South Florida. Did that for 2.5 years, and then opportunity came up to join UTEP in 2019 as the associate AD. So, which I mentioned earlier. So, anyways, I just kind of everybody has a different story, and some individuals are able to do all that at one institution. For me, it's taken me across the whole entire country, and now I'm here in Denton, Texas. So.
So, when you have applicants that apply to you for a job, an internship or an entry level position, those kids coming right out of college, Do you think when you look at their resume, or when you see someone who's been at a university prior, is that a normal path to go every 2 to 3 years from one institution? Is it frowned upon, do you think? Or do you think that's what most athletic departments are looking for, is people who have spent time in certain areas and have gained knowledge and are moving? Is that a normal path in collegiate athletics?
I think it can be, as long as you're showing growth, and you're telling a story. I think I've always been able to tell a story of why I've left universities to go to a different university. If I was taking the same role at 5 different universities, that would look maybe like the situation isn't necessarily working out. But as long as you're continuing to show growth, I think that's the biggest thing. If you're gonna take a role at a different university. And um, every school has different needs, different fits from that standpoint. um, and anyways, yeah, I would say more than anything, it's just um,
Growth.
growth. Yep. Hmm.
So in your role at UTEP, you had a 2-year stint in one position and then a
Hmm.
2-year stint essentially in another position. How did those two positions differ?
I would say my first 2 years as the associate athletic director for development, definitely more um, working with our fundraising team, coming up with campaigns, ideas to generate more donors, being more in the weeds on how are we going about renewing folks? How are we going about getting folks back in the door and getting new folks in the door from a donor standpoint? Um, the other role was definitely more, you know, trying to, trying to lead and provide motivation for the folks who were in the ticketing office, and the fundraising office, and then, helping those individuals, come up with big ideas. In the ticket office, in 2021, we were able to sell out our opening game versus North Texas, and that wasn't just, let's sell out 45,000 for a UTEP versus North Texas game. And this is prior to me working at North Texas. But it was a get together in January, create a plan. How can we do this? Um, and coming up with kind of some of those parameters. Also, in my role as senior associate AD for revenue generation, um, sport oversight. So I oversaw our men's and women's golf programs. So that, when when you're hiring a new coach, that kind of becomes a full time job in and of itself. Um, and then, both of our coaches at the time didn't have an assistant coach. So in some ways, although I'm not a good golfer, I was a little bit of an assistant coach in regards to helping them from an administrative standpoint, that aspect. So, and then serving as a member on the executive team, you're going to be pulled in, some different directions in regards to things that might not necessarily be revenue generated, but what the overall state of the athletic department, you know, student athlete experience, that type of stuff. How is that going? And then cumulatively, as an executive team, coming up with kind of the route that the athletic department is going to continue to go.
Excellent. So as we were talking earlier off camera, we were talking about your role here at UNT, and you had mentioned that there is a student fee
Hmm.
associated with the athletic department at UNT.
Hmm.
What is that like, and how is that different from UTEP, and what changes or what benefits do you see in that?
Sure. Um, student fees, a lot of universities passed students fees, 20, 30 years ago. Um, and it's basically for every class hour that a student is taking, a fee is being assessed, and part of that fee is going to the athletic department. A lot of times, what schools will do is that fee will cover the cost of tickets, so that the student is not accruing that cost. Um, but some schools have both. When I was a student at the University of Missouri, we had to pay our student athletics fee, but then also we had to we had to pay for our season tickets as well. And then at the same time, if we wanted to go, we were in a drawing of 10,000 students trying to go to that had 4,000 seats at the football stadium. So, anyways, kind of lost my train of thought there.
Well, UTEP didn't have that though.
Yeah. Student fee at UTEP, we didn't have it, and it can be pretty tough to pass it. You have to go in front of the Student Government Association, present why the athletic department needs the fee. I know there were some schools this last year that presented to student government, and they weren't able to get that fee passed. Ultimately, it can help the athletic department a lot. A lot of schools will to take advantage of momentum. If they're going to if they just went to the NCAA tournament and they're really trying to, hey, we got to keep this thing going, the student body might be more accepting to taking on a student fee. Sometimes you see a combined use of a student fee. Like I think at Tarleton State, they did a student fee that allowed students, it was almost like a combined facility to where students would get access to a part of the facility, and the athletic department would take access to the other part of the facility, and that's what that fee was helping to pay. So you see a lot of different schools get creative with it. North Texas, I want to say, I'm not 100% positive, but the fee was passed 6 or 7 years ago. And then from a budgetary standpoint, I mean, it helps us out immensely.
I would imagine so. That makes up for some losses that perhaps don't come in from donors and funding and things like that. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about ticketing. You mentioned several times that you hadn't been involved on the ticketing aspect. When you first went into athletics, did you think of ticketing as one of those avenues to get you where you wanted? Had you considered ticketing?
When I got into athletics, I just wanted a full-time job, and I would kind of go wherever that was. But I'm so grateful that it was ticketing. I learned pretty early that fundraising was going to be if I wanted to be an athletic director, which is still my goal, that I was going to need to have that fundraising experience, be able to have, high-level conversations with supporters and corporate organizations about, naming opportunities or capital campaigns, all that stuff. But ticketing is the base bone of what we do from a revenue generation standpoint. Very rarely do you bring on a new supporter that hasn't had season tickets for many years. And so I knew I wanted to be out of development, but I really wanted to I wanted to get into development, but I really wanted to understand the ticketing aspect, just because, I still to this day utilize it quite a bit. A guy I was meeting with yesterday to talk about support, he had questions about club seats, and it's easier for me to answer that because I've had that experience. And from a ticketing standpoint, the business analytics of it, understanding Excel, being able to manipulate that data to be able to present to, the president or the athletic director. Like I can't say enough about starting off in that area before I made the transition. And I'll always say that, on the development side, we're always looking for individuals that have started off in that area, just because, at the end of the day, and Amy, this, when you had relationships with donors at UTEP and they had an issue with ticketing, or they needed, they wanted to renew their tickets, were they calling the ticket office or were they calling the person they had a relationship with?
Exactly.
And I've always said that if you can handle that situation, instead of saying, hey, why don't you give this individual a call? And, it's not as smooth, especially if the individual expects, a certain, type of treatment, or, they do have a good relationship with you or whomever. So
for students just starting out in the sports management program, they may not be well versed in what development is. Can you explain development, because you've used that term several times now, and development as it pertains to ticketing and development in other ways? Go ahead.
Yep, development is going to be the fundraising aspect of your athletic department. So fundraising can be through a variety of things. It can be a lot of schools have mandatory. They used to be called. They used to be donations that went along with purchasing season tickets. That changed in 2017. The IRS changed a rule that if you bought season tickets and there was a donation associated with it, that could no longer be tax deductible. However, athletic departments still require, they didn't change their pricing from that standpoint. They still kept the cost the same. They just changed the vernacular of it, saying instead of it being a donation, it's a mandatory seat contribution. But that still kind of falls under the development or fundraising arm of athletics. What you're seeing a lot of schools do, though, is the development team, the fundraising team is not as focused on the ticketing side and is going to focus more on philanthropic fundraising. So here at North Texas right now, we have a facility that we're doing to expand our south end zone practice complex. It's about a $40 million cost. We have to raise 20 million of it. That's our big thing right now within the Mean Green Scholarship Fund. Our club is we're kind of 100% focused on getting with folks to try to raise the capital necessary to be able to move forward with that project. On the ticketing side, it can be, as you know, Amy,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work, so you definitely have to have a good team, of 6 or 7 folks that can take renewal calls, that can take care of folks, so that allows the other revenue generators to focus on different projects.
So as part of our job at UTEP and the development team, we did raise money for the training table for the football program. Is that something that UNT does, or is that something that their football people take care of entirely?
Well, every school is going to have a different situation. At UTEP, our budget was
Small.
Was 24 million. So that we did need to raise money for food for our student athletes. It just wasn't in the budget to be able to provide the number of meals that our competitors were providing. At North Texas, our budget is 48 million. So that's not necessarily an area that we're focusing on fundraising, because we're able to cover it from that standpoint.
Right. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Allows you to focus on things that are more on the development side. So
Correct.
in your role now, what would your daily job look like?
Let's see. I mean, I'm 6 weeks in on the job, so I'm still learning quite a bit. I did have a fun experience over the week, though, over the weekend. We were lucky enough to have we purchased tickets to the college football national championship game.
Oh, awesome.
So we had one really good supporter in the Houston area. But there was a couple of other supporters that we were trying to, get to know better, and ultimately be able to tell them what our mission is at UNT and what we're trying to do as an athletic department. They were former football players, one former football player, one former track student athlete. We had another former student athlete who lived in Austin. So we brought them over to Houston. We hosted them at the game. We went out to dinner. We got to know them better. And, so the reason why I say that, organizing that trip took quite a bit of time this last week, which, is kind of underrated, understanding what the logistics are going to be to, maneuver around that stadium and, find a place for dinner and make sure you have all your ducks in a row. The rest of this week right now, I have a lunch today with a donor that I haven't met with yet. Right now, I'm just trying to meet as many people as possible, whether they're donors, whether they're on campus, our campus partners with Institutional Advancement, the Alumni Association, and then our coaches, trying to have a one-on-one with all of our head football coaches to see what their needs are, from a fundraising standpoint, if there's anything we can do to help support them, and really just put a name to face with as many people as possible. As you know, when you're working in a large organization, you're more responsive to the folks that you've met with, and you've had conversations with, and you've seen them eye to eye. And so I mean, that was just my biggest 90 days is how many people can I meet, how many names can I memorize, and then from there you kind of learn, okay, these are the areas that we're good at, these are the areas that everybody's saying we need to improve on, and these are the areas probably that maybe we focused on at previous institutions, but like we kind of talked about training table, probably don't need to focus on that as much here. So you just figure that out through so many conversations.
Cool. Let's change gears one more time and let's talk about Learfield. Most young student athletes don't have any idea about the partners that we use. We used Learfield. We changed, right? We had Learfield initially, but then went with Wagner. Okay.
Yep. Went with Van Wagner in 2019.
Okay. So what is that partnership like? Explain that for the students so that they can understand what that really means when they see that come across the screen during football games and basketball games. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so Learfield started as a company, ironically enough, in my hometown of Jefferson City, Missouri. It was an agriculture company that basically went on the radio and would talk about what the weather was going to be like and how it would affect your agriculture. Those guys went up to the University of Missouri, and this is like in the 70s, and said, hey, what do you think about us putting your football games on the radio? They ended up doing that, and it morphed into sponsorships on the radio and to sponsorships within the athletic department. I mean, Learfield has, and then to now where it's a multi-billion-dollar company that oversees sports properties, which is going to be the sponsorship arm for these athletic departments across, pretty much 90% of the athletic departments in the country. That it's how the model is, from an athletic standpoint, is that Learfield and these third-party entities will pay the athletic department a guarantee. So that guarantee can range from $1 million to $10 million, depending on what your property is. If it's the University of Alabama, you're probably getting more up here. If you're North Texas, you're probably getting more down here. But and then that guarantee allows the athletic department not to necessarily focus on getting the Coca-Colas of the world, getting the the Peterbilt,
Budweiser.
All the larger brands, because Learfield already has a lot of those relationships coming into it. The reason why it's profitable for Learfield is they're betting on themselves, saying, okay, if we give this university $1 million or $2 million guarantee, we think that we're going to do more than that in business. Once it hits a certain threshold, that's when the rev share will come in, where say if you hit 2.5 million, any dollar that's come in through sponsorships after that is going to be 50-50 split with Learfield as well as the university. So really it's just a way for the university to leverage a third-party relationship that has pre-existing relationships with some of the largest brands out there, and it allows the university to predict what the revenue stream is going to be and focus on other areas of focus, instead of having that as just one other revenue area that you're really having to focus. But there's a lot of, as you would imagine, there's a lot of overlap. Some of your best donors are going to be some of your best sponsors as well, because it's not just large multinational companies. Some of them might be regional players as well, and they might be doing both from sponsorship and donation standpoint.
And it's hard to double dip with those people.
Yeah.
You want to manage those relationships carefully so that you're not making them feel like they're the only ones that you're coming to every single time.
Exactly. Yep.
So
For
one
sure.
one final thing for the students, what advice can you give to students in the sports management program who are either in the middle of the sports management program or who are graduating, in May? What advice can you give them?
I would just say, obviously you want to be able to put something. It doesn't really matter what is, you need to have a resume that has not necessarily all of this experience, but things that you've been working towards, so that if somebody, you know, in my role looks at a resume, it's like, okay, they're getting after it. They're trying to, they're trying to make their way in the industry, um, and like I said earlier, just the resiliency. When I was an undergrad, I just felt like I was never going to get in the industry. I mean, it was so many no's, but I learned so much about myself during that time period. It was kind of like a validation of, do you really want to work in this industry, or do you want to work in another industry? And it's like, no, I really do want to be in this industry, and I want to make a career out of it. So it was kind of like that go time of whether, was I willing to make the sacrifices necessarily to move from Missouri to Delaware or wherever, to go, from that standpoint. So I would just say, if it's definitely what your passion is and what you're trying to pursue, stay positive, stay resilient. One of these days, if it is really what you want to get into, a bubble will pop. And then once you're in, and as long as you're a good team player, you keep a positive attitude, you continue to learn and grow on a daily basis and try to get better at your craft. People will recognize that, and you'll continue to expand, in your role, and make your way up in the industry if that's what you're trying to do.
Excellent. We certainly appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.